Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Sebuah masjid yang dinamakan sebagai Masjid Jamek Cina akan dibina di Bandar Botani Kelang, Selangor dengan keluasan 2.98 ekar yang boleh memuatkan seramai 1,000 orang jemaah. Masjid dengan seni bina tradisi Cina ini akan dihiasi dengan kaligrafi Cina Islam. Berbagai kemudahan yang disediakan di dalam komplek masjid ini seperti bilik kuliah, pejabat pentadbiran, rumah pelindungan, bilik imam, kedai dan restoran. Jumlah keseluruhan kos pembinaan masjid ini adalah 30 juta ringgit. Kerajaan Negeri Selangor telah pun menyumbang sebahagian besar peruntukan bagi pembinaan masjid ini. Baki sebanyak 11 juta lagi perlu dibiayai melalui sumbangan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan dan boleh disalurkan kepada Persatuan Cina Muslim Malaysia MACMA. Dan masjid ini dijangka siap pada Mei 2022. Untuk mendapatkan maklumat lanjut dan menyumbang, sila hubungi nombor yang tertera di bawah ini. Sekian, terima kasih.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh and good evening everyone. Alhamdulillah, today we have two scholars with us and both are my very good friends. And the first one is Professor Dr. Khairul Anwar Mastor. He's a professor in personality and assessment and development. Also, his other expertise in psychology of religion, especially on religiosity. He conducted research together with MACMA on perception of Chinese on Islam and Muslim 2 years ago. Personality changes among Japanese converts in 2017 and still continue. And currently, he is a Dean, School of Liberal Studies, Pusat Pengajian Citra, UKM. He wishes to learn Mandarin and Chinese culture so that he will interact better with our Chinese people to tell more about the beauty of Islam. So, Assalamualaikum, Prof. How are you?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you. I'm good. Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
And our second panel for our dialogue tonight with the title "The Ties Between Chinese and Islamic History" is a very young and handsome chap. My other good friend, Dr. Hew Wai Weng, who is a fellow at the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, or Ikmas. He has published on Chinese Muslim identities, Hui migration, and urban middle-class Muslim aspirations in Malaysia and Indonesia. He is author of Chinese Ways of Being a Muslim, Negotiating Ethnicity and Religiosity in Indonesia, and also Identity Cina Muslim di Malaysia, Persempadanan, Perundingan dan Kacukan Budaya, and published by Penerbit UKM in 2014. So we have two great scholars with us, and they are going to share something with us, very valuable to us. And every panels will be asked 3 questions, and every question will be about 10 minutes each. So we start with our first panel, which is Professor Khairul Anwar Mastor. So Professor, what are those perceptions on Islam and Muslim by the Chinese in Malaysia? Because the community always perceive that being a Muslim is a Malay, by being become a Malay, and also Chinese are the non-Muslim. So maybe it's quite hard to change that perception. So can Prof tell us how do Chinese perceive Islam and Muslims? So I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Johari Yap. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And to my colleague, Dr. Hew, and the others participants. I would like to begin by saying that the perception of Chinese towards Islam and Muslim. There are diverse opinions on that. Hani, if you can play my short presentation. This is the first question. Can you go straight to the four factors? Can you? Yeah. Because this is based on my study with MACMA. So we interview 48 individuals on certain questions, and then we find. Can you move on to the next slide? Yeah, the questionnaire were in Malay, Chinese, and English. These are please stay at the first slide just now. Okay. Actually, we come up into finding four aspects of perception or opinions towards Islam. Three are considered opinions that might be quite negative about Islam. One factor is about the positiveness of Islam. The first one is about Islam being incompatible with Chinese culture. And the second one is Islam is not a progressive religion. And the third one, this is quite common, the rigidity and the difficulty of Islam. And the fourth one is the good, something positive, that although the majority of the opinions is perhaps in different tone, but the last one shows that the Chinese also perceive some goodness of Islam. If I can elaborate a bit more, can you go next to the next slide? Okay, the first one, as mentioned by Dr. Johari himself, that becoming Muslim is associated with Malay. So if you become Muslim, it means you become Malay. But in Chinese, they perceive this to a certain extent. This is based on interview, not my word. So no offense, but so Malay sometimes is considered as lazy, cukup makan saja, and do not work hard. But the Chinese, they are different. They are diligent, hardworking. So this is quite considered as incompatible with the Chinese people. So if you want to become Muslim, you will the Chinese people will be afraid of you become like the Malay people. And the second one is in Chinese culture, some practices considered contributing to the happiness and friendship, like playing cards, alcoholic drinking, and eating pork. These are meant to be social phenomenon that bring into happiness. But yet, Islam is against all this. Again, the Islamic values are not compatible to this culture of Chinese culture. So this is again considered as Islam incompatible with the Chinese culture. And most important thing is about when someone embraces Islam, he might lose their Chineseness, or he might lose the Chinese culture, like the identity, the name. So this is something that is very sensitive to the Chinese people. So that is the first one. The Chinese perceive Islam in that context. Next slide. There's one paper on this writing by Ruzi Mangwa Wongma, published in Asian Ethnicity. And the next slide is about the second factor, which is Islam is not progressive. The Chinese perceive that women cover, when you become a Muslim, Chinese cannot, they have to cover their hair, a sign of backwardness as comparison with the women in the West and the East. And not alcoholic drink, and some rules are considered obsolete and barbaric. Men can have 4 wives, not vice versa. These are all the negative one, but along with the international Western propaganda, Muslims are seen as terrorists. That's quite extreme, but it might be embraced by certain part of the Chinese people. I'm not sure about that. The third factor is about difficulty and rigidity. Too many rules. The Islam has too many rules, regulation here and there. This is kena potong when you become Muslim, and these rules are considered restrictive in nature, mengongkong, and once no longer can enjoy the food that they normally conceive, and once reverted to Islam, there is no turning back. And these are among the examples. And the last one, factor 4, next slide, is about the goodness that the Chinese people perceive that Muslims are generally law-abiding people. They are patient. They don't play cards. They don't drink alcohol. Well, they can see some of the Islam as a way of life, like Islamic banking, takaful, and other examples. And Muslims never ridicule their own religion. So these are all the 4 factors that considered as how Chinese perceive Muslim in general. So that is my response, Dr. Johari. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yes. So we can see there are 4 factors that we can see from the perception towards the Muslims. And now we can go to another question to our panel number 2, Dr. Hew Wai Weng. Being a Chinese yourself, so maybe based from your experience and your research, you can tell us about how Chinese Muslims' identities evolve and change over the last few decades. So I pass to you, Dr. Hew.
Yeah, hello. Yes, selamat malam, salam sejahtera, and good evening. Many thanks to Dr. Johari Yap, Prof, and also thanks to MACMA to inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share with you some of my thought on Chinese Muslim in Malaysia. I'm not really a historian, but I will rather focus on some contemporary dynamic of Chinese Muslim in Malaysia. I mean, a little bit of history here. I think Chinese Muslim has a long existence in this region, in Southeast Asia, especially in Malaysia and Indonesia. The interaction between Islam and Chinese cultures and local traditions can be traced back to a few centuries ago. It's not new. There are some Chinese old mosques and also religious artifacts in these regions which have a Chinese influence, and this can trace back to a few centuries ago. There are also studies that suggested that there are possible role of ethnic Chinese in the Islamization of Nusantara, or this region now called Southeast Asia. So, but however, such close interaction between Islam and Chineseness began to change since the colonial period. And then from then until now, after the independence, there are certain government policies, certain politics that cause some tension or rift between Islam and Chineseness in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. Both countries have sizable Chinese Muslim minorities. Chinese minority, most of them are Muslim, but there are also a few % of ethnic Chinese in both countries are Muslim, and many of them are convert or sometimes being called mualaf or saudara baru in Malaysia. So those who converted to Islam in the last few decades, I think as a Prof mentioned, the perception is by not only by ethnic Chinese, but also I think by some non-Chinese Muslim, I mean especially Malay Muslim, they expect Chinese Muslim to become Malay, masuk Islam itu masuk Melayu. I think in Malaysia, it's especially because Islam has been constitutionally, politically, and sometimes culturally intersected with a Malay identity. But however, I think since 1980s, there have various attempts by some Chinese Muslim in Malaysia to build Chinese-style mosques. But at that time, some proposals has been turned down, if not unwelcome. In the same way, in Indonesia, during the New Order period under the Suharto leadership, Chinese Indonesians were prohibited from publicly expressing their Chinese cultural identities. And those who converted to Islam are assumed to assimilate it into the local ethnic majority groups. However, despite these obstacles, recently, I think Chinese Muslims in both countries have increasingly expressed their cultural identities. They try to challenge this kind of perceived incompatibilities between Islam and Chineseness, as Prof shown just now. Indeed, I think in the over the last decade, there has been call to preach Islam in Malaysia and also Indonesia to incorporate Chinese cultural elements as an attempt to disseminate or to spread the messages of Islam among non-Muslim Chinese. So you have Chinese-style mosques, you have Chinese Muslim preachers, ustads, halal restaurants, and also Chinese New Year celebrations. These are some strategies that has been done to promote a better image of Islam among non-Muslims, and also to show that there can be a Chinese ways of being Muslim in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. But for sure, I think as I observe, I think Chinese Muslims in both countries, in Malaysia as well, are not homogeneous. They are very diverse, because there are different conversion reasons, socio-economic status, religious affiliation, political participation, cultural practices, and so on. So there are some Chinese Muslims who want to remain or want to highlight the Chinese identities. But there are also some segments of them that think that, after becoming a Muslim, then you should not, you should downplay your Chinese identities, or something that certain Chinese cultural practices are haram or not appropriate according to Islamic teachings. So there are some people also think like that. And also, of course, Chinese Muslims are very diverse in terms of participation in Muslim NGOs and political parties. So you have some people active in MACMA, but there are also people in different groups like in PAS, in Amanah, in Ikram, Jamaat Tabligh, and so on and so forth. So, I think this is a brief share about Chinese Muslim identities over these few years. That's all for now. Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hew. But the one that said by Dr. Hew just now, one of the ways to change the perception of being a Muslim equals to being a Malay, we promote the building of Chinese architecture mosques. The first one in Ratau Panjang, Dr. Hew went there already. I'm the one who brought him there. And then we had one in Ipoh, Melaka, Seremban, and recently a small mosque built in Pulau Pangkor. And the latest one will be in Klang, Selangor. We can see in the introduction video earlier by our President, Professor Datuk Dr. Taufik Yap Yun Hin. Now, we go to the next round with our first panel again, Professor Dr. Khairul Anwar Mastor. Prof, what should be the Malay Muslim do to ensure that they perceive Chinese as also their brothers and sisters? Because normally, because of the risk distribution, only, the Malays, brothers and sisters with the Malays and the Chinese with the Chinese. So how can the Malay Muslim do to ensure that they perceive Chinese as also their brothers and sisters, so that they will see the beauty and the universality of Islam? Islam is universal. Okay, Prof.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Johari. Very challenging question. I think a second question is about what should be the, if I can reword the question, the Muslim, especially the Malay or the Chinese Muslim themselves, do to ensure that they perceive Chinese as also their brothers and sisters, so they can see the beauty of Islam. I would like to begin by saying Islam is a universal religion. It's a religion embraced by not only Malay or Chinese, but if you go around on the globe, there are Muslim in Africa, there are Muslim in America, in Europe, in Australia. Even now, you can also see the Muslim in the Antarctica or the Arctic. That shows the universality of Islam as a religion for everybody. So how do the Malays, especially being Muslim in Malaysia, and also some Chinese Muslim, see their colleagues, the Chinese people, as also their brothers and sisters? I would like to say that the best way is to treat us as human beings, have a similar life cycle, being born into this world through the similar way of birth, and also we have a same anatomical structure of the body. We have the same physiological system in the body, and so biologically we are the same, and externally we are the same too, except we have different appearance. The Chinese has even mata sepet sikit, but the Malays bulat sikit, but in all we see that Chinese, Malay, Indian, and whoever, they are human beings. So how do we as Muslim ensure what to do? So the best thing is about sharing Islam as a universal religion. One of the way is to share some commonality, some similarity in the matter of life. For example, share about exchange the ideas about how we should treat our mothers. In Islam, we put the high status of the mother and the woman. So I think the Chinese also, Chinese culture and tradition perceive mother as someone who must be respected and loved. So there are some similarity that we can exchange, so that they can see some of the values that Islam hold is actually the same values that hold by the other people, regardless of their religious background. And I think we should see whoever Chinese or Indians or Malay in a way that they are human, they have their emotion, they have their life cycle similar to the one we are experiencing. So I think the Malays, Muslims should be more open. They should regard the Chinese should also be given opportunity to learn about Islam. I think that is the role of MACMA at this point, as a society that promotes Islam in a Chinese way. I agree with that. I'm supporting MACMA to show that being Islam doesn't mean that you leave behind your Chineseness, or you leave back your Indianness or the Malayness. As long as the Chinese values or the Indian values or the Malay values are coherent to the value of Islam, then there is no issue of changing your cultural identity when someone becoming Muslim. So I think the best way is to share the right version of Islam, following the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba, the way how they live as Muslim, not to see the example by the current Muslim who are not really practicing Muslim. Of course, there are also many Muslim who are following the right way, but there are also some Muslim who less obedient and they show not a good example. So the best way is to bring about Islam in the actual version is by showing Islam what's being taught by Quran and the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I think what should be done is to tell Islam from the right sources, and I think that is my opinion on that. So over to you, Dr. Johari. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. So like what they said, we look at the religion, Islam, don't look for Muslim, but look for the religion itself. So if you look at history, Islam was introduced to China during the Sahabah period by Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, officially sent to China by Osman, the third caliph of Islam. And then we also know about the great Admiral Cheng Ho, or Cheng He, was also a Muslim. So by right, Islam and Chinese are not alien. So we go back to our second panelist, Dr. Hew Wai Weng. What are the factors contributing to the recent emergence of Chinese Muslim cultural identities? Maybe you can share with the audiences.
Yeah, thanks. I think maybe the slide can turn on, honey. Yes. I think overall speaking, I think there's difference. The trends of expressing Chinese identities, as you can see, there are Chinese style mosques, halal restaurants, Chinese New Year celebrations. I think over the last 10 years, I think there are a few reasons contribute to this. I think there's recognition of Chinese cultures. I mean, in Indonesian context, because during the Suharto period, Chinese not allowed to express their Chinese identity, but they are allowed to do so now. Then also the rise of urban Muslim middle class, the diversification of Muslim consumer market, and also the quest of some Muslim activists to preach Islam to non-Muslim Chinese, as Prof mentioned before. So I think it's not only about Chinese Muslim, but actually there are some Malay Muslim. They're also enthusiastic in promoting or in preaching Islam through the way of using Chinese cultural symbols and practices. I think there's a few reasons. The first of them, I think, is there are growing expressions among Chinese Muslim cultural identities among Chinese converts. For example, Dr. Johari is wearing Chinese red tangzhuang today. Many Chinese Muslim converted to Islam in the past. I think during the past, many of them because they are due to intermarriage or for economic reasons, and they might come from a lower middle class or less educated, or they are maybe not Chinese speaking, Mandarin, not speak Mandarin, and therefore they are more easily assimilated into the Malay community. But today, I think there's increasing numbers of more middle class convert. They are more highly educated, and they converted to Islam because of our religious interests, and they take their religious seriously. And some of them, actually quite a lot of them, they also would like to maintain or at least publicly manifest their Chinese identities. So they think Chinese culture as a symbol or as an important asset for them to facilitate them to share Islamic message among non-Muslim Chinese. So this is different from the past. They think after you convert to Islam, you must Melayu. But now some Chinese Muslim, they think that after we convert to Islam, we can still remain our Chinese name, we can still eat Chinese food, and so on and so forth. I think, and then second, I think maybe the next picture, next slide. There's also the recent influx of Hui migrants and students in Malaysia, especially Hui ethnic groups from China who are Muslim, becoming more visible in Malaysia, especially since recently 1980s. Many come to study in Malaysia, for example, in the UIA, International Islamic University of Malaysia. And after they study, some of them, they continue to stay and they run their business or do their jobs in Malaysia. In addition to students, there has been also recently a growing numbers of more religious motivated and economically driven Hui migrants in Malaysia. So they come to Malaysia to learn, some to study, to learn about Islam, and some even to work as imam. I think in Kelantan there's one, in some mosques they come from Chinese imam from China, and also they want to live in a Muslim majority countries. They want to look for job opportunity and run their business networks. For example, running a lot of restaurants, which I think is very popular. I think Prof maybe been to some of them. The Lamian, a signature dish among Hui Muslim, which is very popular now in Malaysia among Malay Muslim as well. So I think this are some example of showing that Islam and Chinese can compatible together. I think there's increasing number of urban Muslim middle class who do not rely on government assistance, and also who do not view Islam from a Malay or ethnic perspective. Like in the past, I think many Muslim NGOs, they were less keen to preach Islam to non-Muslim Chinese. And there's some worries that when a Chinese convert to Islam, he can become Bumiputra, and then he can steal away the economic benefits associated to the Bumiputra, which is not really often the case, but there are some perception on that. And there also some of these groups, they also think Islam as a core identity marker of Malay. So if a Chinese become Muslim, then he should or she should become, act like a Malay. I think over the years, such perceptions are not totally gone. I think the research of Prof showed there are some this kind of perception still remain, but I think there has been also a little bit change or diminishing in some way. I think because many Malay Muslim began to think that Islam beyond do not see Islam as merely a Malay religion. And they emphasize that Islam teach Muslim against Asabiyah, against racism, and against tribalism. So I think this is related to the last point. I think there's a growing demand for diversity within Islamic perception expressions among middle class or Muslim in general. So they do not want to see all the mosques in the same style. So they're happy to support Chinese style mosques. They don't just want to eat Malay food. They want to eat different, Chinese food, Japanese, and so on. So I think this demand for cultural diversity within the Islamic framework, I think this trend reflects a more culturally inclusive and also a socially tolerant of Muslim practices in Malaysia, which I think is a positive trend. But I think there's also in the last few years, I think, unfortunately, there's also a setback. You see there are people talking about Malay Muslim unity, quote unquote, a more racialized understanding of Islam. They are on social media and so on. So I think there are also some not so positive happening, especially in the last few years. But I think we can discuss this later. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hew. So Dr. Hew shared about the Lamian, the mi tarik, and we have also one in Kota Baru, mi tarik warisan at Yon Mall. So one of my favorite as well. And also he commented that I wear a red samfu tonight. Yes, because I want to look like Chinese, because my eyes are not small enough and I don't really look like Chinese, so I have to wear so that I look more like Chinese. Otherwise, people thought that I'm Malay, because I'm a Muslim, and being a Muslim, I might as well be a Malay. So dah jadi masuk Melayu, so I have to wear red and wear like Chinese so that I don't really masuk Melayu, I just become a Muslim. So now we are entering the third and also a final round for today's forum, and we still have time for any question to ask. You can type in the chat area, and we have our two great scholars here. We'll try to answer your question as best as possible. So now we are back to Professor Dr. Khairul Anwar Mastor. Prof, what are the recommended practice yet effective approach to tell the truth and teaching of Islam among Malaysian Chinese? Pass to you, Prof.
Thank you, Dr. Johari. Hani, can you play the slides for my third question? Before I answer that question, I just want to also note to the here that I also like mi tarik. I'm the fan of mi tarik. So in Bandar Baru Bangi, there is one shop run by the Chinese Muslim from the mainland China. His name is Isa, and Yusuf, and the other one is I forgot their name. And interestingly, the cashier of the shop is a Malay girl, but she speaks Chinese very fluent because she studied at Sekolah Rendah and Menengah Chinese. So that's interesting. So the question on what are the recommended and practical approach? I would like to answer this according to the 4 factors that we found in our research. So can you move on, Hani? Yeah. The first one is about that Islam is incompatible with Chinese culture. This is the perception, not from all the Chinese, but some of them. So I think the first one is to tell that Islam also spread in China. Uh, the Islam in China is much earlier than Islam in Malaysia. So that's one factual information that is to show that Islam is compatible to the Chinese culture. Otherwise, Islam did not spread well in China. The next way is perhaps, please stay to the slide. Okay. Share the conversion stories from the American, the Japanese, the African. There are many video shots on the YouTube. They are sharing why they became interested in Islam by the American, by the European. I've seen quite a number of those YouTube. And one of those similar stories that I can summarize from that YouTube is that those who finally became Muslim, actually they have their inner intention, their inner hope for the guidance. Then Allah give them guidance. And we also should practice respecting cultural differences. So I'm okay with my baju Melayu here, but Dr. Johari is much handsome with his red. What's that name? So Chinese
Samfu.
sampu.
Yeah,
Sampu.
Cheongsam for the ladies and Samfu for the men.
Okay, interesting. So, but I like also Chinese food is fine because Chinese food are good and halal now is easy to get. So we go for similarity rather than differences. As I mentioned earlier, love and respect to mother. Islam uh, suggests certain ways of doing it. The Chinese culture have their own way of doing it. So we share some commonalities. Actually, in one hadith saying, hadith of Prophet Muhammad SAW saying that if a son or daughter look at his or her father or mother in a loving way, so he will get sawab or reward as if that he's looking at the Kaaba. MashaAllah. That is very big virtues of respecting and loving our parents. And also to keep Chinese identity. So I think MACMA is doing this well to promote that being Muslim doesn't make your Chinese less, because what the Chinese is doing, most of them are compatible to the Islamic values. Even you keep your chopstick, just continue using your chopstick, but all with the right hand, not the left hand. So that is the way how projecting Islam and adapting the cultural within Islam. So I remember reading the book on the Jahiliyyah, the Arab Jahiliyyah, the pagans that Rasul SAW said that in the culture of the Jahiliyyah Arab, the pagans, there are also good culture like respecting the visitors. So meraihkan tetamu. So that is actually begin not even before Islam. So when Islam came, the good values of that culture is taken along together with the Islamic values. And it is also, I would suggest that non-Chinese should learn more of Chinese culture, know more about Chinese culture, their languages. I'm thinking that if I have more time, I would like to learn Mandarin or Hokkien or Cantonese. So this is a way of making ourselves close to that culture. So this is a factor number one. If we are going to use these approaches to tackle the number one factor. The next factor, can Hani go on? Yeah, this is the example of harmonizing Islam within Chinese culture. A picture showing Professor Taufik and his wife. What his wife is Malay, but his wife wearing red costume, and he himself, what is that? Just that red costume, and show the sign of happiness, perhaps. So that is something interesting. The assimilation of the cultural Chinese cultural and the Islam. Next slide. This is a book. I think I haven't read this book fully by Dr. Hew himself. This is good on how Chinese way of being Muslim. Very interesting book. Next, Sunny. Okay. The factor two is Islam is not progressive. I think this is maybe not everybody have this kind of opinion. But to tell the truth, there has been many publications showing the invention of science that conform to the knowledge of Islam as before, like the embryology, the universe, the, 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 the galaxy and other things, the Big Bang theory, all those can be well explained by Islam. And the knowledge about the civilization brought by Islam should be expounded to the people out there, so they know that the human civilization is also partially contributed by Islam. And use a light approach. Do not mention too much of the punishment and the hellfire, but we should focus more on the good tidings, which are Jannah and the rewards. The goodness of the good reward for being good. Of course, those who disobedient are going to punish and but hellfire. But this is something that people might don't want to hear. So we should use the light approach, the lighter approach, so people can understand the religion better. And to explain why Muslims should abide their religion, because the basic principle is that by obeying Allah and His Prophet, the life will be more barakah. He will get the reward in the day hereafter. So if someone we see very obedient, very following the order of Islam, it is not meant to show off, but also it is actually a sign of loving God, loving Allah, a sign of His penghayatan in His life. The third factor, next, is about rigidity and difficulty of Islam. This is quite rampant when through our interviews with our colleagues, Chinese colleagues. They highlighted this much about the rigidity and difficulty of Islam. So how to overcome this? We show portray the simplicity of Islam. And Islam is simple to practice. That is, and then I can see also, do not stress more on the fiqh. Tell the rationale and the benefit behind all those foods. Why Muslim? I remember when I was in Australia for my study there for my PhD. I did part-time teaching non-Muslim and new Muslim, the Australian non-Muslim and Australian convert. So at one time, one lady, just a convert lady, Australian lady, she asked me one question, and he asked me, never answer me using Quran or Hadith. I want a logical answer. So I think, yes, please proceed. What's the question, sister? So she asked me, tell me why Allah prohibits hinzir. Why Allah prohibit hinzir, eating pork? Why? I don't want any religious answer. I want a very sensible answer. So, mashallah, I was a bit worried at that time. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah. So I just told this sister that, let's say in this room, her point is, why Allah prohibit pork or hinzir, but still creating the hinzir? Why? So I just told her that, let's say in this room, there is a direction, don't play piano. Don't play piano. That is the directive rule. Don't play piano. My question to her, does it make sense if there is no piano in that room? Does it make sense? Oh, then she seems to be accepting my answer. Okay, I understand. Allahu Akbar. So a very simple, straightforward answer. If Allah asks us to avoid or to prohibit us from taking hinzir or pork, the rationale behind it actually is to test our obedience. So religious is about being obedient to the rule set by God, by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Anyway, we must also tell our brothers in Chinese brothers and sisters, there are always exemption. There's no hard rule. You do, you don't. There are also some gray area where there are exemptions. Those who are pregnant are not allowed even to do fasting in Ramadan. Those who are very weak are not allowed to fast in the Ramadan. Even those who go into the building houses, they are very tired. They need some drinks during day hour. They are allowed not to fast, but later they have to redo the fasting. So there are some exemption in Hukum Hakam Islam. There is no hard rules that people think in a different way. And the fourth one, the last one, is about the positive. This is the good one is goodness. This is just example how MACMA Penang has done the Chinese New Year at the most. There's very creative way of doing it, and also some Chinese term that relates to religious practices and the hijab, that the woman can try doing their hijab and see how they feel when they put on the hijab. And the last one, Hani, okay, this is the goodness of Islam. Actually, when it's something good, they perceive good, I would say we can enhance that by telling more about the belief system, the Aqidah. Share more stories of the Prophet Muhammad SAW and his companion. There are many great stories about Prophet Muhammad, and our Muslim brothers themselves have to demonstrate the real, actual Islamic way of life. That should be a connection between salat or prayer with the akhlaq, with the behavior. So the people outside will question the Muslim if one going to the prayer but still doing bad things. So what is it? So So that Muslims should improve their salat, their religious ritual, and connecting those to the performance of the good behavior or good akhlaq. So I think that's about some recommendation on the way how we can tell our Chinese brothers and sisters about Islam in a more palatable and acceptable way. Thank you, Dr. Joe. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Yes, true. We have to show the beauty of Islam. Otherwise, it'll be cakap tak serupa bikin. We have to improve our akhlak to show that Islam is beauty, not just say, but we act otherwise. And just now, Professor also shared the slide showing our MACMA President, Professor Datuk Dr. Taufik Yap Yun Hin. Yes, if you can see on the name, Professor Taufik maintained the Chinese name, the Yap Yun Hin. He just add an Muslim name in front to maintain his Chinese identity by maintaining his Chinese name, Yap Yun Hin. And you know, last time we must change our name to bin or binti Abdullah. So that's why the perception is there, being a Muslim is being a Malay, because the moment you say syahadah ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, then we have to change our name to bin or binti Abdullah. Then to make the matter worse, during conversion or syahadah, we wear baju Melayu, samping, macam nak pergi bersanding. So that's why the Chinese perceive being a Muslim by being a Malay. But now things are different. We can maintain our name. We have Dr. Haji Anwar Seng, no bin or binti Abdullah. Yeah, he maintained his name and he's already went to Hajj few times. And also we have Brother Lim Dwi Sun. He's one of our dawah activists. And we can also add the Muslim name in front, like Taufik Yap Yun Hin, or in Kelantan we have one committee member with the name Izwan Lee Tian Chuan. So if we can accept the Chinese with the name of David Ong, so why not Daud Ong or Johari Yap? So that's why we in Malaysian Chinese Muslim Association or MACMA, we encourage the reverts to maintain their Chinese identity as long as it is Sharia compliance, so that we are not perceived as becoming a Malay. So we also promote Chinese food, also the like bak kut teh. Even though the Malays they thought bak is pork, it's wrong. Bak is meat. So like the Malay, if they go to buy some nasi belau, so if they want chicken, they say nasi belau ayam. But if they want beef, they say nasi belau daging. They didn't say nasi lembu. So they say daging, lauk daging. It's the same like to the Chinese. Bak means daging. So they want, if they say bak, associated with pork. So, but it's okay. They change the name bak kut teh to cik kut teh, you know, for chicken, or bak kut teh, changing with the goat. But what about bak chang? So we can have our K chang, or ak chang, or bak chang. But that one we can have another forum for that. So sorry for taking your time. So we're back to our second panelist, Dr. Hew Wai Weng, for the third and final question. Dr. Hew, what are the roles of Chinese Muslims in preaching Islam and promoting tolerance? What are the challenges they face?
Yes, thanks. I think as Prof. Dr. Yap, Johari Yap mentions, I think there's a recent trend of using Chinese culture elements in Islamic preaching. I mean, I call it as a cultural dakwah using cultural approaches. So I think, Hani, you can share the slide. I think these are some Chinese-style mosques in Malaysia. I think there's Kelantan Beijing Mosque, the one in my hometown, Seremban Asahada Complex, and the other one is Masjid Muhammadiyah in Ipoh, Perak. So these are a sample of recently built Chinese-style mosques. I think there are a few in Malaysia, and also there's similar trends in Indonesia. Most of them, they are quite new. I mean, in the last 10 or 10 years or so, and they refer to architecture of all mosques in China, but they also reconfigurize within local tradition and local context. I think in Malaysia, the most recent, the first one after this in the last 10 years is the Jupri Perak. So that is Petra Mosque. So because that's not Beijing Mosque, because the mosque are referred to the architectural design of Oxford Mosque in Beijing. I think it's completed in year 2009. I think I've been there. I think thanks to Dr. Johari, because I can go to this mosque and visit there. And I also have the opportunity to interview Dr. Runik Aziz, the Menteri Besar of Kelantan and the spiritual leader of Parti Islam Malaysia at that time. I think he is one of the key figures behind the establishment of this mosque. I think his idea and his encouragement to build this mosque. As he told me, I think conversion to Islam does not mean we have to abandon our culture. I think this mosque to show that Islam is a religion for all ethnic groups. It's not only for Malay, but also for Chinese, for Indians, and for any race, ethnic groups in Malaysia. And then the successful, I think, of this Beijing mosque has inspired or helped the creation of other similar mosques, but sometimes different design, but they have some Chinese features in Seremban, in Ipoh, in Melaka, in Pulau Pangkor. I think the recent project, I think you can see in the introductions by Prof. Taufik, the new Masjid Jamek in Klang, which is in the planning to build that. So I think besides Chinese mosques, they also have activities such as, I think it's since 2010 together with MACMA, I think Hidayah Center also runs a Chinese New Year celebrations to show that Islam can. Maybe the next slide, Hani. Yes. There's a Chinese New Year celebrations. Even some of them are held in the mosque. There are some controversies and some debate, but generally they are quite well accepted by both Chinese and also Malay Muslims. At the same time, there are also growing number of active and popular Chinese Muslim ustads, preachers, and influencers. I think Dr. Johari mentioned some of them. There are plenty of them in their preaching since in Malaysia today. So most of them are promoting a more inclusive and a tolerant image of Islam, but there are also some of them might not doing so. So there are some challenges here. So they're not all Chinese, not all Muslim endorse cultural da'wah, or not all Muslims endorse a more inclusive way of looking at Islam. So for example, there are some Chinese Muslims think that we should not, there's a small number, they think that we should not emphasize too much Chineseness. The Malay might not happy, and then some might think that the Isang or the lion dance is not Islamic, is against, there's elements that run against Islam, according to them. So there are these sentiments there. But of course, I think MACMA leaders, presidents, Prof. Taufik Yap had refuted such claim. He stresses that lion dance is just a cultural expression. Isang is just a culinary food. So it's not necessarily entails any religious connotation. So, but there are still some debates on these issues. So I think in today, I think there are some Chinese Malaysians still have some negative perception. I think we have to admit that there are some negative perception, as Prof. Khairul already mentioned. But likewise, there are also some Malay Muslim who have negative prejudice and negative, comments towards ethnic Chinese, and not only Chinese, maybe different groups in Malaysia, non-Muslim in Malaysia. So I think we have to deal with that. I think Chinese Muslim could play a more active and important role to bridge Malay Muslim and also non-Muslims Chinese in Malaysia to promote religious tolerance and cultural diversity. So you have places like Chinese mosque, Chinese halal restaurant where different group of people can get together. But maybe as Prof. Khairul also recommended, more can be done. So more dialogues, more activities to bring different people together. So I think the last point, I think it's important for us to accept diversities and differences. I think not only between different ethnic groups and religious groups, but also within the group. So for Chinese, they have to I think many Chinese, they can speak Chinese, but there are also some Chinese who prefer to speak Malay. They're also Chinese Muslims, so we have to accept diversity within Chinese and also diversity within Muslim society as well. Yeah, there are different Muslims from different ethnic groups. They have different political opinions, religious affiliation, and yeah, different school of thought and so on. But I think we have to accept each other and try to respect each other. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hew. Yes, like what Dr. Hew said just now, there's a few certain Chinese Muslim that disagree with what Malaysian Chinese Muslim are doing. They said you emphasize too much Chineseness. So MACMA mencinakan Islam, bukannya nak mengislamkan Cina. So, but anyway, that's normal because we have different opinions, different school of thought. But we, being a Chinese Muslim from a Malaysian Chinese Muslim Association, we want to show that we can maintain our Chinese culture while being a Muslim. So anyway, agree to disagree. So as long as we can live in harmony, should be no problem. Anyway, for both of the panels today, we have one question from the floor, from the audience, from Brother Naib Muhammad Saiful. Assalamualaikum. And a very good evening, moderator and panelists. As we know, Chinese civilization is famous for its economy. There is a book entitled The Art of War, right, from Sun Tzu, as a reference for the civilization in strengthening their economy. My question, in the opinion of the panelists, how Islam can apply this philosophy in developing the ummah and economy? So, you want to go first?
Dr. Hew is the right person to answer.
I'm not good in business. I'm not really in, I think maybe Dr. Yap or Prof.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually read the book, The Sun Tzu Art of War. There are a few strategies. And how can Islam apply this philosophy in developing the ummah economy? How to answer that?
I haven't read that book, so I cannot answer that.
Maybe we go to another question first by Babek Swah. Dr. Hew touched on racialized Islam as a recent setback. Can Doctor elaborate further on this?
Thanks for that question. I think this question, maybe we might need another forum to talk about that because it's a yeah, thank you.
So, cannot give in summary, just summarize the question.
No comment.
Okay, so maybe we go to another forum because I'll take very long time to elaborate, so we might take another 1 hour. So any more question from the audiences?
Maybe a quick note on the economic thing. I think it's not really say we have to reference to Chinese classic, or I think there are also Islamic ethics on doing business. I think there are book writing about Prophet Muhammad as an example of businessman and so on. So I think there are many references to develop economic. I mean, for Muslim or non-Muslim, the reference from the classic. So yeah, I think the most important is I think you can learn from different sources and practice it in developing economy for Muslim and also non-Muslim. Yeah, that's just a general answer to that question.
Okay, maybe I can add a little bit more from Dr. Hew, because in Islam, part of our duty as a Muslim is to pay zakat, or it's a compulsory tax as a Muslim, about 2.5% from our income. So by paying zakat to the Majlis Agama Islam Negeri, and with this zakat, we have 8 asnaf, the poor and the fakir and also the mu'alaf, and we have 8 asnaf that are eligible to receive zakat. Then we can use zakat as one of the way to develop the ummah and as well as the economy. So, and we also have wakaf to help this. So actually, if we talk about this, then it will take another 1 hour. So yes, actually, Islam is progressive, and Islam is the way of life. Then Islam can make can help in developing the ummah or economy by practicing the actual way of Islam life, not just by saying, but we have to practice it as a whole. So maybe we are comes to the end of the forum. So maybe I can invite the two panelists to give their final words. So we start with Professor Dr. Khairul Mastor. So anything that you want to advise to the audience, your final words you want to share before we end the session?
Thank you, Dr. Johari. I would like to say that coming back to my original point, that Islam is a religion for all, because Allah sent prophets, the Nabi to people of the earth to invite them to know who the Creator is, that is Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And religion is something that is a serious matter, not only in this world, but for the hereafter. So I think for our colleagues, Chinese brothers and sisters out there, if you want to know more about Islam, you may seek advices from the religious scholars. But more important is to refer to the book of Islam, which is Quran, the original sources, and to be interacting with the good Muslim who are practicing, so that the real picture of Islam can be demonstrated and can be understood better, inshallah. Life is very temporary. According to Islam, life is a journey. This world is part of the journey, and the journey still goes on until the day of judgment, and that is something that everybody will face. And therefore, I come back to the statement just now. Religion is a serious matter for this worldly life as well as for the after. So to know Islam is to read more channel to know Islam nowadays. Just open up your YouTube and many other authentic sources. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry for any shortcomings in my expression and explanation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Khairul Mastor. Before we go to our final words from Dr. Hew Wai Weng, there's one final question from the audience. Our Chinese Muslims seem to be going overboard in asserting the Chinese identity, as the Chinese themselves do not do that themselves. So before you answer that, I always heard that sometimes they say lebih Cina dari Cina. Yeah, but how can we be more Chinese than Chinese, because we are already Chinese? So, but if I become a Muslim, I can be lebih Melayu dari Melayu because I'm a Chinese. I cannot be more than a Malay. But for a Chinese to behave like a Chinese, to practice the Chinese tradition, can I be more Chinese than the Chinese? If I hang lantern in front of my house and wear some food like this, am I being overboard? Anyway, I pass to Dr. Hew. So, please.
Oh, I have to answer the question. I think it's up to everyone to decide whether they want to be Chinese or not Chinese. Is their personal choice. I think at this point, I think there's some leaders in Chinese Muslim associations, they would like to emphasize on Chinese. I think they are welcome. I mean, they have the right to do so, because I think there are reasons to do so as well. Because in the past, the Chinese Muslim have been seen as we're losing their Chinese identity. I think this perception that not happen to other Chinese Christian, Chinese Buddhist, and other Chinese of other religious background. so they don't have this kind of negative or perception to begin with. So they don't have to express that, highlight the Chineseness. But I think this is a very different case for Chinese Muslim, because in the past there have been perception that they will be assimilated. But I think nowadays they have different choice. If you want to become more Chinese after Chinese Muslim convert, I think it's fine. But if something that I don't care about my Chineseness, I think it's also up to them. I think we have to respect differences. So so some people like to wear juba. I think some people like to wear kurta. Some people wear to like samfu. I think it's diverse, different expression of Muslim cultural identities. I think we have to accept these differences. So I think if I come back to my final word, I think it's the same point. I think we have to accept our diversities and differences. I think that as my presentation just now, I think over this last few years, despite their diversity, there's a trend to express Chinese Muslim cultural identities through mosques, halal restaurants, Chinese New Year celebrations, and so on. Of course, there are different debates, there are different thoughts and how to do it. Is that overboard, or is that haram, and so on. I think it's normal to have these different opinions, but we can discuss this in an open and inclusive way. So I think the last verse, I think, is like Prof. Khairul already mentioned. Chinese Muslim can play a more important role to promote a more inclusive and a more progressive image of Islam in Malaysia. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hew Wai Weng, and then thank you so much also to Professor Dr. Khairul Anwar Mastor. So we are at the end of our session with the title, The Ties Between Chinese and Islamic History, and we have a very good discussion tonight, and thank you so much to Professor Dr. Khairul and also Dr. Hew for being with us this evening, and hope that we can have another discussion in the future. And thank you so much for the audiences who stay with us from 9 o'clock until now. Then we can end this session with wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Daripada Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan radhiyallahu anhu katanya, sesungguhnya saya mendengar Rasulullah SAW bersabda yang bermaksud, sesiapa yang membina sebuah masjid kerana Allah, nescaya Allah akan membina untuknya sebuah rumah seperti itu di dalam syurga. Sebuah masjid senepenas Cina, iaitu Masjid Jamek Cina, telah dirancang untuk pembinaan bersama oleh Jabatan Agama Islam Selangor JAIS, Jabatan Kerja Raya Selangor dan Persatuan Cina Muslim Malaysia MACMA. Reka bentuk kompleks Masjid Cina ini telah mendapat perkenan ke bawah Duli Yang Maha Mulia Sultan Sharafuddin Idris Shah Al-Haj Ibni Almarhum Sultan Salahuddin Abdul Aziz Shah Al-Haj apabila dipersembahkan kepada baginda di Istana Bukit Kayangan Shah Alam. Konsep pembinaan masjid ini adalah berdasarkan paksi pusat dengan pembahagian ruang yang jelas dengan penggunaan halaman. Ia mempunyai sebuah menara masjid yang unik, senebiana Cina, dan ruang solatnya yang berbumbung akan dipasang dengan jubin tradisional Cina. Kawasan taman yang dapat digunakan sebagai ruang solat tambahan, penggunaan unsur kayu di kawasan solat utama dan dihiasi dengan tulisan kaligrafi Cina Islam. Kos keseluruhan masjid adalah sebanyak 30 juta ringgit. 11 juta ringgit lagi masih diperlukan. Sumbangan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan budiman adalah amat diharapkan. Maklumat lanjut boleh didapati seperti mana tertera di bawah ini. Semoga sumbangan tuan-tuan dan puan-puan diberikan ganjaran yang sebaik-baiknya daripada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Sekian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.